Welcome to part 10 of the IAL Edexcel Chemistry Unit 1 AS level specification revision. Today we'll be looking at 4B. This is the second last video, and then the last video is alkenes, okay? And then we'll be done with Unit 1, okay? So, starting off very quickly, know the general formula of alkanes and cycloalkanes and understand that they are hydrocarbons, compounds of only hydrogen and carbon, which are saturated and contain single bonds only. Okay, so we talked about the hydrocarbon meaning, hydrogen and carbon. That's why they call hydrocarbons. They contain that only. You have to mention only. Okay. What do we mean by they are saturated? This basically means that they have carbon-carbon single bonds. Okay. Now there are two things here: alkanes and cycloalkanes. Alkanes are basically just like chained, straight chained or bent chained molecules. So it can be like that with H, H, H. You get the point. Or it can be C, 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 C. These are all alkanes, okay? Alkanes have a general formula of, let's just count. So 3 carbons, C3, 1H, 2H, 3H, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, H8. Here we will have 1 carbon, 2 carbon, 3 carbon, 4 carbon, C4, and hydrogens 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, okay? H10. If we look at the common, in terms of N, what will we get? We'll get CnH2n plus 2, okay? You're not supposed to know how to obtain this, but it's important to just know it, memorize that the general formula is this, okay? You can see that it pertains to this. When we put n as 3, we'll get 2n plus 2, which is 2 times 3, which is 6 plus 2, 8. So it does pertain to it, okay? Now, what is cycloalkanes? Cycloalkanes is basically just when they are in a circular or ring-shaped, okay? This is cyclohexane. Now, important thing to note, each carbon will have 2 hydrogens, okay? Because each carbon is bonded to 2 carbons already, so it'll only have space for 2 more bonds. So it'll be CnH2n, the general formula, okay? Because for every one carbon, there's 2 hydrogens, 2n, okay? We can just take that very quickly. Understand the term structural isomerism of alkanes and cycloalkanes with up to 6 carbon atoms. Okay, what is a structural isomer? Structural isomer. Structural isomers are basically molecules with the same molecular formula but different structural arrangement, okay? Let's look at an example, okay? C5H12, okay? This is pentane. It has the general formula CnH2n plus 2, but anyways, we're not supposed to look at that right now. Let's draw C5H12. 5 carbons, and these are all the hydrogens, okay? Now, this is one of the isomers of pentane, of C5H12. Now, another one can be, this is what pentane. Now, another isomer can be, let's just draw one out first, okay? Now, I'm just going to add lines, but every line represents, there's supposed to be a hydrogen on the end of every line, okay? But for time, we'll not draw it. What is this molecule called? This molecule is called, the longer chain is 4 carbon atoms. So it'll be 4 carbon atoms, and then there is a 1 methyl. So if it's 1 carbon with if it's 1 carbon attached, it'll be methyl. If it's another carbon attached, let's say it was like C, and then, another one, that would be ethyl. If it's another one, it'll be propyl. So, we did in the previous video. I think it's somewhere up here. Yeah, we drew this here. So now just add methyl. So add YL to each of them, okay? But what I'm trying to bring from that is, if you have a shorter chain attached to a longer chain, as you can see, 1 carbon attached to 4 carbons, you will have to start with this one, okay? But then you have to know the position of it. This is located on carbon number 2. You go from the lowest side. So this is 1, this is 2. okay? You cannot go from this side 1, 2, 3, because that is not how it works. You go from the lowest side every time. Now, one important thing to note is for this molecule, as there are 4 carbons, if you do have, let's say, 2 methyl butane is what this is called, you're not supposed to mention the 2. Why is this? This is because you cannot have this any other way. It can't be 1 methyl butane because that would just be pentane. Let's look at an example of what that means. You can't have this, okay, and then carbons everywhere, because the longer chain is 5-chained. There is no chain in the middle, okay? Again, you cannot have 3-methyl butane because, as we talked about, you always go from the shorter side. So another possibility is you have the carbon here. But if you do have the carbon here, you always take the shorter side. So this would be carbon 1, carbon 2. So it'll still be 2-methyl butane. It will not change. So in cases like this, we can just not mention the 2, okay? But in cases where we have a longer carbon chain, like for 6 or 5, let's look at 5, and you have a methyl group here. This would be 2-methyl pentane. Methyl and then pentane because it's 5. If we have it over here instead of here, this will be 3 because 1, 2, 3. It'll be 3-methyl pentane. If we have it on carbon 1, it'll be 6. It'll be a long chain, so it'll be hexane. It won't be 1 methyl pentane because that is just hexane. If it's over here, remember shorter side, this is 1, this is 2, so it'll be 2 methyl pentane. That is a diversion from what we're talking about. What we're trying to talk about is structural isomerism. So as we can see, these two have the same formula, which is C5H12, but they have different arrangement. So they're structural isomers, okay? Yeah. Be able to draw and name the structural isomers of alkanes and cycloalkanes up to 6 carbon atoms. So we've talked about how to name these. Let's look at another example. Let's look at 2-ethyl hexane. So whenever you have this, you always start with the longer chain, hexane, 6 carbon atoms. So you start by drawing 6 carbon atoms in a chain, and then you look at the number here, 2. So you go from any side and you go to the second carbon, okay? And you draw an ethyl. Ethyl is 2 carbons, so you will just draw it like this. Again, you will not get a mark if you leave it like this in the exam. Put hydrogens, okay? I'm just doing it to save time. But yes, that is ethyl hexane. That's how you draw these, okay? Actually, correction here, it's a mistake. 2-ethyl hexane doesn't exist. Why? Because, let me show you something. If we look at this is always supposed to be the longest chain, which is this. But it is not the longest chain. This chain has 6 carbon atoms. And this chain will have 7 carbon atoms. So what I've drawn is incorrect. This can come in a multiple choice again, okay? Do not make the same mistake as I just did. But instead, how do we name this? We take the longest chain, which is heptane. We leave it there. And then we take this. How many carbons are here? The attaching chain is just 1, so it'll be methyl. And what position is the methyl located? 1, 2, 3 from the short end. That's from that side. Let's look at it from the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we take it from this side, okay? So it'll be 3-methyl heptane. Sorry for that mistake, but yes, that's basically how we name it. 2-methyl hexane doesn't exist, but 3-methyl hexane does exist. Long chain, and then have it in the middle, okay? This is 2-methyl, because if you take it like this, it is 6, but it's still 2 carbon atoms attached to the third position, okay? Let's look at dimethyls as well. Let's look at dimethyl propane, not propane, sorry, hexane, okay? Let's look at 3-dimethyl hexane. So you'll have 6 carbons. You always start with this hexane, so 6 carbon chains, and then you go to position 3, which is this carbon, okay? And you draw carbons on each side. This will be methyl here, so 2 methyls is dimethyl, okay? And then you attach the hydrogen atoms. So you can tick that. Cycloalkanes is the same thing, just instead of writing just an alkane, you write cycloalkane with it. Know that alkanes are used as fuels and obtained from fractional distillation, cracking, and reforming of crude oil, and be able to write equations for these reactions. Okay, so fractional distillation is basically distilling. When you distill crude oil, it will give you different stuff. Okay, what are we talking about here? Let's have a container. This is a normal container, and it has different separations. And essentially, you're not really supposed to know this as much as we may seem, but personally, I've not seen it as much, but it does come, so it's good to know these stuff, okay? So crude oil is put into this, and it will be distilled into many compartments. At the bottom will be bitumen, okay? Or bitumen, I don't know how to say it. Then fuel oil, then lubricant oil, then diesel, kerosene, then you have naphtha, and finally, and then you have petrol, and finally you have refinery gas. So the lower you go in the fractional distillate, you will get a higher and higher melting temperature. So the gases come out really quickly, like refinery gas, it's a gas. And then as you go down, the melting temperature will keep on increasing, okay? So yeah, this is basically what, try and make a way to remember the order of this. Do not know the entire order, but just know how everything goes, okay? An example is you start with bitumen, I like to think of this like Batman, bitumen, and he's always on the ground, I don't know why, but yeah, because I don't know, but I think of it like that. And at the top is refinery gas because it's the only gas. Then we have the oils at the bottom, so it's lubricant oil and fuel oil. Fuel oil is below because it has lower letters. That's just the way I try and remember it. And then we have the petrols and the diesels here, We have a petrol and diesel sandwich. Petrol and diesel are found at the fueling stations. So it's a sandwich between the two. They're the two buns. And then in between we have kerosene and naphtha. I don't have a way of remembering those. I just cram it. But yes, that's a way of remembering these things. Equations for these, you're not supposed to really know it that much, but again, we do need to know the cracking equations. It's written here. Cracking, okay? What is cracking? Cracking is breaking down longer chained carbon chains that are not useful as much into smaller chain molecules, okay? What do you mean by this? Let's take an example. C16H34. This is the alkane with 16 carbon atoms. It's an alkane, CnH2n plus 2, the general formula, and it is cracked into C10H22 plus an alkene, okay? You cannot crack it into two alkanes. You cannot crack one alkane into two alkanes. You crack it into an alkene and an alkane, okay? So these are now useful, okay? This is not as much as useful as those other two, but yes, continuing, this is an equation, okay? Know that cracking is one reactant being broken into two. One is an alkane and an alkene. If the one you're breaking is an alkane, okay? Know that pollutants, including carbon monoxide, oxides of nitrogen and sulfur, carbon particulates, and unburned hydrocarbons are emitted during the combustion of alkane fuels. Combustion of alkanes. Let's know what that means. Combustion is basically to add oxygen to something or to burn something. You burn something by adding oxygen to it, okay? So an alkane plus O2 is combustion, okay? Let's take an example. Let's look at just methane, okay? When you add oxygen to methane, you're burning it. You always form CO2 plus H2O. To balance this, you just add the two here, okay? So yeah, alkanes are completely combusted to form CO2 plus H2O. However, they can be incompletely combusted, okay? This is complete combustion. Incomplete combustion is where they don't receive as much O2 as they need to. CH4 plus O2 gives you carbon monoxide plus water, H2O. Now, with this, as you can see, it's incomplete combustion because you don't completely burn the hydrocarbon, so you're left with carbon monoxide instead of carbon dioxide. Okay, this is a toxic gas, so you do this in a fume chamber. Anytime you're given a toxic gas, do it in a fume chamber. Anyways, let's move on. Then you balance this equation. But yeah, that is about that. Continuing, understand the problems arising from pollutants from the combustion of alkane fuels, limited to the toxicity of carbon monoxide and why it's toxic, and the acidity of oxides of nitrogen and sulfur. Okay, now one of the main things I was supposed to look at is actually here. Why is carbon monoxide toxic? When you are, let's look at a bio demonstration here because you're supposed to know this actually. In your lungs, that's very deformed lungs, but anyways, in your lungs, you're not supposed to explain it like this actually. Let me just explain it a better way. Carbon monoxide basically combines with your hemoglobin. So you have hemoglobin, and hemoglobin essentially transports oxygen. It's part of your blood and it transports oxygen across your body. Okay, now when you get carbon monoxide, it combines with hemoglobin to form carboxyhemoglobin. Again, carbon monoxide plus hemoglobin will be carb, remove the mono, then write oxyhemoglobin. It's a very simple name. That's how you derive that name. So you form carboxyhemoglobin, and you will essentially, this will reduce the number of oxygen atoms it'll be able to carry, okay, in the blood. That's why you'll have breathing issues, respiratory problems is what we call it, okay? Yeah. Combustions of alkanes do lead to CO2, which is it's a greenhouse gas, so it does cause problems. Now, acidity of nitrogen and sulfur, we are not supposed to know it as much, but in the car engines, nitrogen and sulfur fuels, the catalysts, so I don't know what I'm going into detail about here, but we're just supposed to know that nitrogen and oxygen, the oxides of them are very acidic. They do lead to sulfur oxides, do lead to acid rains, even nitrogen oxides. But yeah, they're both toxic gases, is what we're supposed to know. In the car, they are converted into less toxic gases, okay? So we're supposed to know those things. But yeah, can just take that. You're not supposed to know as much about 4.14. I don't see it being tested as much, but it's good to do a bit of research into those things. Next up, be able to discuss the reasons for developing alternative fuels in terms of sustainability and reducing emissions, including the emission of CO2 and its relationship to climate change. CO2 is in the atmosphere. Let me just draw very quickly what it is. This is your Earth's, the hemisphere, okay? Half a globe, okay? Now, on the atmosphere, you have a layer of CO2 that when light rays from the sun come, they reflect off the Earth, but they get trapped because the carbon doesn't let them go outside, okay? So they get trapped in the heat gets trapped in the atmosphere, hence increasing the surface temperature of the Earth, okay? That's basically what we have to know about that. So humans have developed other techniques to, collect fuel. An example of this is a methanol fuel cell or an hydrogen oxygen fuel cell. Yeah, but these both, they use a part of electrolysis to do the stuff, Again, unit 1, not really tested as much. If it's tested, it's usually a 1 or 2 mark question. But yeah, it's good to know the types of fuel cells, the alternative types of fuel cells. Now, what I do see being tested is they ask you reasons to why you have a hydrogen oxygen fuel cell over these other fuel cells. It's because you don't produce carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas. Like if you do, burning a hydrocarbon is a source of energy, yeah? But it does lead to the formation of CO2, which is a greenhouse gas. So instead, hydrogen oxygen fuel cells are used, alternate fuels sources, sorry, which do not give CO2, hence they aren't a pollutant, okay? We can tick that. Be able to apply the concept of carbon neutrality to different fuels such as petrol and bioethanol. Okay, again, this is not tested as much, but what is carbon neutrality? When you burn a tree, it releases CO2, okay, as gas, okay? But it is said to be carbon neutral. Why? Because throughout the plant's life, this is a tree, its leaves, this is a leaf, it takes in CO2 and it holds that CO2 to grow, okay? And as the tree is burnt, carbon dioxide is released. So the total net movement of carbon dioxide is zero throughout its life after it's burnt. That's why it's said to be carbon neutral, okay? Yeah, but fuels, different fuel cells are either carbon neutral or non-carbon neutral. Burning petrol is not carbon neutral, but hydrogen fuel cells, they are carbon neutral, okay? So we're supposed to know those kinds of things. Now, understanding the reactions of alkanes with oxygen in the air, we've done that. That is combustion of alkanes. With halogens, okay. This is a slightly big topic, but it will cover both of these, okay? So, alkanes react with uh, halogens to produce halogenoalkanes, okay? Alkane plus halogens to give you halogenoalkanes. Yes, so let's take an example, okay? The alkane in question here is the simplest one, CH4, plus the simplest because it has one carbon, plus Cl2, okay? Now, we're supposed to know the mechanism of this. Whenever you ask for the mechanism in Unit 1 or 2, know that there are 3 steps. One is the initiation step. Second is the propagation step. And the ending phase, which is the stop phase, is the termination phase. Termination step, sorry. What is initiation? Initiation is where the free radicals form. What do you mean by free radicals? Cl2, with the presence of UV light, will be broken into 2 Cl radicals, okay? We are supposed to know that UV light is necessary for this reaction and you have to write it, okay? But yeah, that is what a free radical does, how it's formed actually. This is the only free radical that will be formed through in the initiation phase. Next up is propagation. Let's look at it here. Propagation is when you form, as the products, you form a free radical and you form a product, okay? What do you mean by this? Let's look at one of the free radicals combined with CH4. You will form 2 products. One is CH3 free radical plus HCl. This is always going to take a hydrogen, okay? Keep that in mind. So you form a free radical of CH3. That CH3 can attack again to the Cl2 now. This is this, okay? And you will form CH3Cl plus a Cl free radical, okay? Again, a way to look at it is there are 2 Cl's here, and the free radical always needs one thing. In this case, it cannot take the carbon, so it'll take the hydrogen because it has 4 hydrogens. Here, it will take the Cl because there's only Cl to take, so it'll form this. Now, if you notice something in the propagation step, you will always form a free radical, and you will form a normal molecule, okay? There's no way of understanding this. You just have to kind of cram it, okay? But I'm trying to give ways of, trying to understand these things. Termination step is when 2 free radicals combine. CH3 free radical with the CH3 free radical, you form C2H6. Another one is CH3. This is how a halogen alkane forms now. you form CH3Cl. This is the main step you're supposed to know because it's the formation of the final product, which is the chloromethane. As you can see, only the product is formed, no free radicals. Okay, that's the termination step. That's when it finishes. Okay. Yes. So let's look at it a bit more in detail over here. How do we break this? So you need to draw these. ClCl is like that. Draw half curly arrows that go like this, and you will be forming 2 Cl free radicals. Why is it half and not full? Because chlorine shares 2 electrons here. 1 electron will go here and 1 electron will go here. That's why you draw half arrows. Each half arrow represents 1 electron, okay? The propagation step will be the Cl plus the CH3, okay? CH4, sorry. Negative always goes, the arrow is always from the negative to anything else. In this case, it'll go to the H as we talked about here. Where did we talk about it? We talked about it here. As we can see, Cl plus H, it forms HCl, it takes the hydrogen, okay? And here you will form HCl plus the CH3 free radical, okay? That's one of the propagation steps. The other one is CH3 plus Cl. It will go from that to that and it'll take the Cl. And again, remember, half curly arrows. Each electron goes to each. Whenever you have Cl, do that, okay? One electron splits, okay? The pair of electrons splits. One electron goes to one chlorine, the other electron goes to the other chlorine, okay? So you form CH3Cl plus Cl free radical. And the termination step is quite interesting actually. Cl plus Cl, and they will combine in the middle, okay? You draw half arrows because it's one electron again. You form Cl2. Whenever you have a free radical, you draw half arrows, okay? Or full arrows, that doesn't matter. But again, the thing that matters the most is the chlorine is half curly arrows, okay? CH3 plus Cl. This is the last termination step, and it will combine here to form CH3Cl, okay? There is one more termination step, CH3 with another CH3 free radical to form C2H6, okay? This is our ethene. We can take this. Have we done this as well? We have found all of these apart from the last one, having limited use in synthesis because further substitution reaction occurs. Okay, we've talked about it in our steps. But one more thing we have to remember is this is only for one chlorine being substituted. We can draw this in structural form, so it will be HCl. Now, if we keep continuing with the chlorine free radical again, we can form 2 Cls, you know? If we do 3, we can replace this again, Cl, or 4 Cl, tetrachloromethane, okay? But yeah, that's how we do that. So yeah, in the last video, which will come soon, we'll look at topic 5 of alkenes, which is a very extensive topic, as we can see. It takes 1 page of the specification, like alkanes. But yeah, that's the last one for this video, for this series, and then we'll look at unit 2.